Good afternoon, good morning, colleagues, dear speakers, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear all. Let me warmly welcome you to the LRGs, to the headquarters of the Geneva Cities Hub, and to what has become traditional Geneva Cities Hub plastic debate, as we had already one January 2020, 1 year ago. And this is about participation of local and regional governments in the plastic discussions. We already had last January a debate like this, but we didn't have a treaty negotiation yet. It was in preparation, in progress. And thanks to the wonderful diplomatic skills of some of the diplomats sitting around this table and being online, namely Peru, Switzerland, and others, many others, we have now this negotiation on this new treaty to become on plastic pollution. This event is co-organized also with Geneva Environment Network. Diana Risolio, sitting on my right. Welcome, warm welcome, and thank you for the help for organizing the meeting and on the substance. The Geneva Cities Hub is a neutral platform helping local and regional governments to practice multilateral diplomacy together with states and civil society, mainly where they have an impact and vetted interest. And in the case of plastic pollution and waste management, we believe that local and regional governments has a huge vetted interest. Hence, we organize this debate today about this topic. A very short housekeeping rules. Let me introduce briefly the two speakers. You have read their names, obviously, and titles in the announcement, but we have Bernardo Roqueiros with us. He's a Peruvian diplomat, career diplomat, in the one of the leadership chairs of these negotiations from its inception, and who was at the so-called INC1. So you will explain to us the dynamics of this negotiation. Diana Risolio, on my right, she runs an absolutely amazing Geneva Environment Network as part of UNEP, but also with some sort of autonomy, informing the international community in Geneva and worldwide about all the environmental issues, trends, events, and everything everyone needs to know. So thank you again for being with us. We also have some colleagues such as Damaris Carnal from the Swiss Ministry of Environment being with us online, and some guests in the room. So all the speakers will be asked, there are two of them, to reply to two questions, to questions in 3 rounds of questions. And the questions are part of the concept note, which you have seen in the announcement. All of you, dear participants, you can publish your questions or comments in the chat. And of course, priority will be given to representatives from local regional governments or city networks. So please identify yourself. And if I may, I know it's difficult, but please refrain from general declarations about plastics, pollution, environment, as we have 1 hour time, and we will really try to concentrate on participation of local and regional governments in the negotiation and eventually in the implementation of the new treaty. So with this, and noting that we have this kind of 3 phenomena, the first, that cities and other subnational authorities appear to have little or no knowledge of what traditional interstate negotiation is, and even what is a treaty and how this could imply in reality when the treaty is adopted. The second phenomenon is that a particular treaty, like this one to become, will be exceptionally relevant, and if I can say, its implementation will be exceptionally in the hands of subnational authorities, municipalities and other local authorities. And the third phenomenon, if I may, is that very, very few diplomats and negotiators are really, to my mind, on that dilemma, meaning that the two phenomena above can lead, hence, to the adoption of a strong treaty, its consequent ratification, and practically problems with implementation, if I can say this directly, if the local and regional governments are not included in the process of negotiation and implementation. And I would like to mention that we have made a submission, we'll speak about this later, in this sense, as well as ICLEI, which is a big city network also working on these questions. And again, this will be the topic of the discussion of today. So with this, let me turn to our two speakers and start probably with Bernardo, as you are in the leadership of this negotiation. And please tell us, what does this negotiation has implied so far? What is at stake for states? And what was your role as, I mentioned, one of the leading negotiators? So including a short story and the level of engagement of international community so far, the civil society, and already this famous Inc. one, which was last November in Uruguay. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Camelia. And first of all, I would like to thank the Geneva City Hub for inviting me to this event today, and also to salute also the Geneva Environmental Network here and the colleagues from Switzerland, which are connected online for joining us today, and also welcoming all the participants. You asked several questions, so I'll try to answer some of them, or at least most of them. So first of all, to give you the context, all this process started in Nairobi last year, in February 2022, at the resumed 5th session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, also called UNEA, which was held in Nairobi, where a historical resolution was adopted, and that launched the negotiations of a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, with the ambition to complete its work by the end of 2024. So the mandate that was agreed by all member states from the United Nations was that the instrument should be based on a comprehensive approach that addressed the full life cycle of plastics. And of course, these negotiations will be held under a committee that was created, which is called the INC, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee.
The one I was telling, INC.
INC, exactly, the famous INC, or the INC, which is the negotiation body where the negotiations are being held. And this INC, or INC, has to consider how to promote sustainable production and consumption of plastics, from product design to environmental sound waste management, through resource efficiencies and circular economy approaches. So it's quite comprehensive, the mandate that has to tackle the INC in order to have this legally binding instrument. In this resolution that was adopted in Nairobi last year, we agreed that the member states, that the legally binding instruments should include binding and voluntary approaches, including provisions on different aspects. So, for example, promote sustainable production and consumption of plastics, to promote national, international cooperative measures to reduce plastic pollution in the marine environment, including existing plastic pollution, like the famous legacy plastic, which we find in the oceans or in the beaches nowadays. Also to develop, implement, and update national action plans, to promote the prevention, reduction, and elimination of plastic production, and several other issues like awareness raising, education, and several other aspects. So who participates in these negotiations? Well, the negotiation, all members of the United Nations participate in these negotiations.
So the 193
exactly are all invited to participate in these negotiations, but also different stakeholders can also participate at the INC and to be part of it. One of the big challenges we set up is that we are very optimistic, so we are actually eager to look for a very ambitious treaty and also in an ambitious timeline. So we set up that we should end these negotiations by the end of 2024, as I mentioned before, and the calendar set up 5 meetings of the International Negotiating Committee. The famous INC, exactly. And from these 5 meetings we set up, the first one already took place a few weeks ago in Punta del Este in Uruguay at the end of the last year. And what was very important at this very first meeting in Punta del Este is that it gathered over 2,500 participants from all over the world, from more than 150 countries and stakeholders. There was also a stakeholder forum where different actors could also participate and share their view on the key elements of the future plastic treaty. And we also discussed about all the different aspects that we want in this future instrument. So it was the very first time that we can hear the position of all the different delegations and to have a clear idea of what we want. And I'm personally very optimistic because there was a clear message from different countries, from small island countries, from developing countries, from developed countries, that there is eager to have an ambitious treaty, and this is very positive for the process in order to have a meaningful change in our way that how we handle plastic pollution. So during this INC, we had discussed on the objective of the treaty, the scope, the fundamental elements that should be included in the treaty, binding and voluntary measures, the scientific and technical cooperation, research, awareness raising, and stakeholder engagement. And on this particular topic, on the stakeholder engagement, the chair of the process, Ambassador Mesacuara from Peru, has very clearly encouraged broad and inclusive participation in the process to ensure that the negotiation remain transparent, inclusive, and informed by experts from all different sectors, including academia, civil society, private sectors, and among others. The main outcome after the week we were in Punta del Este, one of the main outcomes was that we, member states, requested the Secretariat to prepare a document with potential options for elements that could be included in the future instrument, which includes objectives, substantive provision, including core obligation, control measures, and voluntary approaches, implementation measures, and means of implementation. And in order to the Secretariat to prepare these documents, it has been asked for 2 member states, but also to stakeholders, to present their contribution, to submit their proposals, in order that this can be taken into account in the document that has to be prepared by the Secretariat, in order to be considered during the next meeting of the INC, in the INC2, which is supposed to be held in Paris, tentatively set for the week of the 22nd of May 2023. So in a few months. Thank you.
Very comprehensive, exactly what we wanted. And while you were speaking, there was a question from one of the participants in the meeting where we can have some details about the negotiation. I'm tempted to reply here and now, so stay with us until the end of the meeting, and that's probably the best place because we organize it like this. So this is auto compliment. Sorry for this. Turning to Diana. So Diana, it was mentioned, so just I need to be a little bit on the vocabulary. So the Secretariat. So this particular body, the Secretariat, actually is another way to call UN. And as Bernardo mentioned, UN, many places in UN, but one particular one dealing with this whole negotiation, and this is UNEP, which is based in Nairobi, but with a branch or with the office in Geneva, where you are part of. So the Secretariat / UNEP / one of the numerous United Nations programs, but the one specialized on environment. So this means is a treaty about environment, although we speak about plastic, but this particular part of the environment. You're part of the UNEP and UN in general here in Geneva. So what is the role of the UN, of the Secretariat, and your role in what Bernardo described?
So the role of the role of the United Nations Environment Programme is to offer a secretariat to this process, so the INC process, we will see what member states will decide. How then, once we come to an agreement, what will be the role of UNEP, if it's finally UNEP that will be administrating this new body or not. But maybe to come back on the mobilization in the run-up to this process, because Bernardo mentioned what happened at the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is the assembly where we took the decisions about our global environmental agenda.
So in March last year.
It was in March last year. But just to remember that ahead of that important moment, there were other, at the precedent UN Environmental Assemblies, we also had adopted a few resolutions on plastics. So it has been a process, and there has been a lot of important mobilization in the run-up to these assemblies. And the mobilization around the last one that happened in March last year was really very important, with a lot of stakeholders involved from all sectors. So not only my colleagues from the United Nations Environment Programme, but a lot of member states, of course, but also the civil society and other stakeholders did a lot of work in support to what finally was then agreed, negotiated in Nairobi in February and March last year. Including, there was ahead of this Environmental Assembly and ECR conference that took place here in Geneva that was co-convened by 4 member states. And it's at the issue of that conference that Peru, together with Rwanda, proposed a draft decision, a draft resolution that was then adopted, negotiated and adopted at the Environment Assembly. And so at the United Nations Environment Programme, there are a lot of there are different offices, divisions that are very engaged on the plastics topic, being the private sector, being through, for example, our regional seas programs and other bodies. So there's an important mobilization on the issue of plastic pollution, which comes and nourishes the discussions that are happening now at the INC, but also in other fora. And because we are here in Geneva, and because, as you mentioned at the beginning, the Geneva Environment Network, it's a platform of all the actors that work on environmental issues at the global level from Geneva. It's also to be mentioned a few other things that are happening in Geneva. One of the bodies we have here are the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. And an important moment here was also in 2019, the adoption of the plastic amendments of the Basel Convention. The ones that have limited the trade on plastic garbage, and this was definitely an important moment also in this process. And you have other forums in Geneva, including at the World Trade Organization, in other places, Human Rights Council, etc., where we also discuss these issues on plastics. And even though now we all put our attention on the INC process, because we need this agreement that looks at all the life cycle of plastics. There is a lot also expected, we hope, as we heard this week, you were with me in Davos earlier this week.
No, you were with me in Davos.
Yes, I was with you in Davos, and we heard the head of the World Health Organization telling us that more needs to be done on the health aspects related to plastics. So we have soon the World Health Assembly coming, so we have other forums where we also need to bring up, and so of course there's what's happening in UNEP and all the actors that are mobilized there, but there's also what member states and other stakeholders will be doing in other negotiations that are taking place here in Geneva and maybe in other places around the world. Maybe also to mention that we see there's a lot of mobilization of different actors, and we have coalitions of actors, high ambition coalitions for member states. We have business coalitions, We have science academic institutions that are also organized in coalitions, and all mobilized in order to have a strong and ambitious agreement, but hoping that this INC process will deliver on something that is very ambitious as well.
And do we know why we don't have? I know what we have, and that's good, but why we don't have local and regional governments at all?
We count on bodies such as the Geneva Cities Hub to maybe put that in place, and let's see then, and I'm looking at Bernardo who's in front of me, what member states, what's the place also that member states will let the local authorities take in this process, or when they prepare their submissions. For example, you just mentioned the submissions that stakeholders are preparing. What's the place that in their own submissions they give to the regions and the local authorities? Because as you also mentioned at the beginning of when you were introducing this session, cities and local authorities have a lot to do as they deal with many problems related to the plastic crisis we are facing.
So let's continue to discuss this. Thank you for bumping on this again. This is obviously the red thread of the discussion. But to understand, we also need to understand, so what are the next steps? So now we spoke a little bit about the past, what happened until now, and it's huge. And also thank you for mentioning that beyond this negotiation of this treaty, which focalizes the attention of many, but it's not a new topic, and there are many other forums here in Geneva also, including the World Trade Organization. And as you said, Tedros, the chief of the World Health Organization, also said that the World Health Organization is very much looking on the plastic problems for the human health. So it's unfortunately a holistic topic with holistic dealing, but none of these instruments and negotiations have led so far to a legally binding instrument. So I think that we are so motivated and excited about this treaty, because this will become hopefully a traditional legally binding instrument under the international law. So turning back to Bernardo, so the next steps you have mentioned already is Paris is last week of May. Again, hopefully 1 week of negotiations. But today, as we speak, there is not yet something which is a draft of this treaty. So we know that there are many ideas, there are many submissions which are available for everyone on the website of this INC too. So you can either Google it, or you can go back to the website of the Geneva Academy to the announcement of this, Geneva Cities Hub, to the announcement of this event, and click on the link. And see all these submissions, which are, I counted more than probably 200 already submissions published on the website.
130, I heard.
Yeah, 130, okay. So there are a lot.
But member states can still submit. So
they can still submit. So we have this situation today. So Paris already settled as the next place of negotiation for the next meeting, the meeting number 2. Waiting for this first draft, or pre-draft, as we call it in diplomatic language. So when this will come, and what are the possible achievements in this Paris meeting. And looking beyond, what will happen also this year, according to you, reasonably provisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Camelia. And indeed, we are still not negotiating a draft treaty, in the sense that we are still not at that stage, but we hope to enter into the discussions very soon, especially after the INC2 that will be held in Paris. The discussions that we'll have on this options element document that has to be prepared by the Secretariat will be very important, because this will give us the path and for what are we looking for the future treaty, and this will help us to already more or less have a better idea and give some headlines to the Secretariat in order that they can already start to have zero drafts on the table for INC3, which is supposed to held in the second part of at the end of the year, in the second part of 2023. Preliminary, it will be in Nairobi. So this is by November or December this year. And indeed, for example, for the preparation of this document, there was already a deadline for stakeholders that they can submit, and that's where you can see, because the INC has a website where everybody can, it's open access, everybody can access to this website of the INC, consult the different submissions being done by the different stakeholders. There is still time for member states to submit until, if I'm not mistaken, until the 10th of February, in order that they can also submit their position. So I know that all the members are working on these documents. And local and regional governments also, it's important that they can get involved, even if the deadline already passed. In order to submit proposals, they can anyway also get in touch with the national governments in order to present their experience, in order to present the lessons learned that they have, in order that the central government can incorporate all those ideas and all those proposals into the national position. Because at the end, what the treaty will have, we expect that this treaty will be a game changer, and this will we will need the participation of everybody. This includes private sector, it includes national government, and also local governments and consumers. So at the end, it's something that is cross-cutting. So this is why it's important everybody's engaged, and the proof of that is that there is already an academic, scientific coalition that is formed, an NGO also coalition, the business sector also got a coalition, so they are all trying to organize themselves in order to get involved. And of course, some members also state the High Emission Coalition, which it's co-chaired by Norway and Rwanda, and Peru is one of the founder members.
How many members you have in this?
Now we are, I think, 50, yes, more than 50 plus members, and we are hoping that we will be more in the next weeks. But this already shows you that there is an important group of countries aiming for an ambition, a high ambition treaty, and we are all working towards that direction.
Thank you very much for this. This absolutely gives a very, very clear picture of what will be happening. And Diana, you come more from probably militant side, although you're part of the UN, but you're very much in touch with civil society, and I know that you're sensitive to their also plead. So there is a lot around plastics, and probably the frustrating part of the story will be that not everything can be included in this treaty, which is a relatively short document. A treaty is a convention, international convention, which will be several pages, but not thousands of pages to include all the submissions. So for you, ideally, again, what are the achievements of the INC2 in Paris, INC3 probably in Nairobi, and then at the end of the day, what we need to expect and what we need to work for to fine-tune these achievements?
What we expect, of course, is an instrument that is as ambitious as possible, and that's also why we have all those conditions that we have mentioned here. But what I wanted to add here is that there are various ways to contribute to the discussion, because there's a lot of outreach on those negotiations. They are all streamed on YouTube, so you can go and follow. And there are a lot of preparatory sessions that are open to various types of stakeholders. So you can also have a sense of what's being discussed, and there you can also bring the voice of your local authorities and bringing to the attention of other stakeholders how the various types of stakeholders can work better together. So, for example, we have mentioned science and academia. If we have more research that also includes the problems of the cities, or the solutions that can be found at the level of the cities, that will also, of course, help the cause that you are supporting here, Camelia. So most of these events are clearly advertised. We at the Geneva Environment Network do an effort in advertising them. Just also to remember here that the UN has this multi-stakeholder process with what we call major group. There is one that is for regions and local authorities, and you have institutions that do represent local authorities and in various negotiations. I have seen in the various submissions that have been submitted for the next session of the INC that you have submitted as Geneva Cities.
Yes, we did. This is there. Yeah.
And I saw that there were other. I can mention their names.
Of course, they are public.
I saw one from ICLEI, for example.
So ICLEI is one of the biggest city networks active in environment.
Indeed. And let's see also if in the member states submissions there will be a particular look at the cities. And also I remember a discussion we had earlier this week when I was with you in Davos, and when you approached one of the organizations that is very vocal on this agreement, which is the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, and there was a special envoy and you were having discussions. So you also, with those actors that are quite active in this process, bringing to their attention some of those perspectives is also a way of making sure that what can be done or how to include the local authorities in the process is something that can be heard.
Thank you very much for this, and obviously we will come back to this to the third and last round of questions in a moment. Maybe time to pick up some of the questions coming on the chat, which Antu is faithfully transmitting to me. So whomever is sending question, don't be worried, I'm receiving it. So there is one question about monitoring. I will paraphrase it because so can UNEA be responsible for monitoring? I guess that probably the right question, and sorry to say so, but just to make it comprehensive for everyone, is whether the treaty, is there any ambition? And once again, you don't know what will be exactly in the treaty yet, because we are not magicians yet. But is there any ambition or rumors that this treaty will have some monitoring mechanism, or as we call it, treaty body mechanism, whatever is the name? So the form of monitoring being from external expert or giving the mandate to the UNEP or something like this to monitor the implementation of this treaty. Is this on the table? Not yet, not at all.
Yes, if I may, Camelia, thank you for the question. And indeed, the question of monitoring and reporting and compliance, those three topics are included in the mandate of that was approved in Nairobi, in order that the INC should consider while developing this legally binding instrument. So indeed, this topic is on the table. We still didn't reach the point to discuss already on details yet how would be this reporting, but this is on the table. And indeed, for any kind of instrument of this ambition, we will need to have a monitoring, a reporting system, and also to know how the compliance is being done in order to be sure that the treaty is being implemented, and if not, what are the problems in order to improve the implementation of member states. Mm-hmm. So this is also important. And of course, for example, if the local authorities can contribute with detailed information of how they believe should have this instrument, including the reporting, they could submit this information to their national governments in order that this can be transmitted and included in the submission.
So thank you very much. Just a clarification. For example, and I'm not an expert on all the conventions, but for example, the famous Aarhus Convention has such a kind of monitoring mechanism. A committee, I think, is called. So are you thinking about a mechanism which will, for example, establish a sort of regular periodic reporting by states, or more functions, or a mechanism which will be working with all the stakeholders, or this will be born into the negotiation?
This will be born from the negotiations, but we have already, as you said, different experience from other treaties, which are following the monitoring and the compliance of member states. We have this also in the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention. We have in different treaties. So indeed, this is something which is normally included in different treaties. So the details, of course, this will have to be negotiated. What will be the mandate of this group or committee that will be created? But right now, everything still is on the table.
It's on the table. And so, in this monitoring body or mechanism or committee, whatever we call it, UNEP will be probably playing a role, probably being the secretariat of this body as we go, or not?
We need to see what member states will decide when we come at the end of the process. But this is also a good question for Damaris, who is online. So,
okay, so
you are the manager.
I don't know. Yeah, Damaris, if she wants to speak online. So Damaris Kernal, as I said at the beginning, is the Swiss, one of the Swiss main negotiators from the Swiss Confederation Park point of view. She is working at the Ministry of Environment of Switzerland, but not officially included as full-fledged panelist. So I don't know, Damaris, I'm forcing you, but you're not shy, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Camelia. Good afternoon to all panelists and other. I'm not sure I have much to add to what Bernardo said, but maybe just a few points. I think it's important to know where we are in the process. And the main focus for INC2 is the core obligations that will be contained in the treaty in order to end plastic pollution. So this is why maybe some of the things might be of big relevance to local governments, but maybe not all of them. Because, for example, we're going to talk about how to reduce virgin plastic production, what are the types of harmful substances we need to remove from the plastics economy, how to also improve product design, etc. And I think probably for local authorities, what is important is that we tackle this this phenomenon, like we end plastic pollution, because cities and local governments bear the brunt of plastic pollution, and it's also very costly for local authorities to deal with plastic. So I think, but as was mentioned by Diana and Bernardo, we will also address implementation and compliance issue, and also how to deal with plastic waste. And I think when we come to these conversations, probably more as of INC3, even if it's already part of the discussion, then it will be very important for us to know what are the main challenges and that local governments are also facing. And I think in this, it's a two-way process. I think, as you have mentioned, the process is quite open to stakeholders. They can participate, they can submit. The reason why the deadline for stakeholders was before governments is in order for their submission to inform the submission of governments. So I think this is also quite an innovative feature of our process. But I think it's a two-way process, because it is also important that local governments, and I think, the Geneva Cities Hub could play also an important role, is what are the main challenges that you're facing and what is it you need that we do through international treaty. And Diana and Bernardo mentioned that, you know, some stakeholders have organized themselves in coalition. We have the business coalition, we have SNEPT, the coalition of scientists, but there's also no impediment for local governments also to ally and to team up in order to become, you know, cities to end plastic pollution, for example, and to also help us know what is it that they would need to see in a treaty in order to make them better equipped to end plastic pollution. So we also, we can do things to include stakeholders, but we also need the inputs as negotiator in order to draft the most ambitious and implementable treaty.
Thank you very much, and this is actually great because this is a very good bridge to the third part, the last part of the discussion. And I was thinking how to introduce it, and exchanging with Antu, who is following the comments and the questions which comes online. Thank you to everyone. Please continue like this for at least more 10 minutes in order to be, you know, in the last minutes of the meeting to be capable to take all the questions. Don't be shy. The story about the treaty, and I will not do a crash course in international public law here, but the treaty is very general, and it has sometimes even a completely non-comprehensive language because it has to refer to a negotiation, and in a negotiation, states and other stakeholders, they come to a level of abstraction which is proper for all the treaties, and we all know that some things can be included, but not really concrete statements. So a treaty will not have concrete, probably content, the way the local and regional governments work. They will not be able neither to see in the treaty, not to contribute with, like, for example, concrete numbers or data, because the level of abstraction of a treaty is bigger. So this might be one barrier for local and regional governments who always speak in a very concrete manner, because the local governments, as the name indicates, they're local, they're close to the ground, they speak on an everyday basis with their residents, and they would like to have a very concrete solution, which sometimes goes into a detail in which the international and interstate level cannot go. So I guess that one of the problems is that we need to translate these concrete expectations. When I say we, is obviously Geneva Cities Hub, but hopefully not alone, but to understand, or even for member states, to go to the level of concrete indications, and to understand from these concrete needs and indications what can be translated in diplomatic language and be included in the treaty. I am optimistic on this because, and we didn't touch upon this element, but this is probably the right moment for Bernardo and Diana to come back on this in the last tour of questions, is the fact that this treaty or this negotiation has an ambition to include, yes, legally binding obligations like in a normal public law treaty, but also voluntary commitments. Also, the possibility of having a part in the treaty or in the annexes, I don't know how it will be, that there are some voluntary measures or some mechanism of voluntary measures, and maybe here is the place to think about, for example, we gave some examples in our submissions, which are taken not only from practice, but out of our reflections. So, for example, the new treaty could promote regular exchange of experiences on national level. So ask the governments explicitly to do regular exchange with their local governments and to report back to the international community if there is kind of reporting. One part of this reporting will be, well, not compulsory, but very strongly inviting national governments to spend regularly that part of the reporting on exchange with local governments on the implementation of the treaty. So this is innovative, I think, but also necessary for this treaty when we know that part of the process of waste management, plastic pollution production is exclusively or almost exclusively in the hands of the local government. So through this monitoring mechanism, through this reporting, and already through the treaty itself, I think that you have the power to create voluntary measures, because it doesn't go directly into the binding part, but voluntary framework for member states to ask them, to remind them, and hence to institutionalize this process, that they talk regularly and report back on practices, exchanges with local governments. Don't want to make revolutions, but I think that this is the part of the story we really want to promote. These measures, other measures you can think about, please, the floor is yours to address this. I understand it's difficult, it's not typical, topic, so whatever you can say, it's useful.
Thank you, Camilla. No, and indeed, I think it's very valuable to have all these different inputs of all different kind of measures that could be included in the treaty, and also binding measures as well as voluntary approaches. So I think both are very important in order to have an ambitious treaty and in order to promote different kind of measures that the members can implement in their countries in order to reduce and end the plastic pollution. For us, we also want, as Peru, for us it's also important to have not only voluntary approaches, but also very important common obligations and control measures for all the countries. As Peru, we are promoting different aspects, like, for example, the elimination of problematic plastics. That could be, for example, including through bans or restrictions on specific plastics, for example, single-use plastics or plastics that contain products that can be harmful to the health and environment. We believe also we need to develop global sustainability criteria and standards for plastics that are being done. We are also thinking that it's important, for example, to reduce the complexity of plastics. Right now, we have a very range of different plastics, which it's difficult to follow, and it's important to have a clarity on this. That's why it's also important to ensure transparency in the plastic value chain. And we are also thinking about other proposals, like we're promoting to reduce the production of virgin plastics and to establish universal design standards to increase reusability and recyclability of plastics. Anyway, there's a vast measures, a lot of measures that will be very important to be settled. We would like to have very important common obligations and control measures, but it's also important to promote voluntary approaches in order that all member states can also add and contribute on this important topic, which is to end plastic pollution. And it will be very crucial that local and regional governments are fully involved, because as you said, the implementation of midstream or downstream measures are very common being done by those local and regional governments. So it will be crucial that they have the means to implement those measures, and that's why also developing countries are also promoting to have also ambitious means of implementation, that the members can implement those measures that we went through, for example, technical assistance, financial assistance, technology transfer, capacity building, among other important topics.
And so also concretely, the central government's negotiating needs to be sensibilized that the local governments who are implementing the treaty on the ground, they need technical assistance, capacity building. The question is not always about money out of our experience, because sometimes there's some funding. Obviously, usually there is a question of giving funding from national level to local level, but sometimes it's to share good practices. We hear very often in our everyday work with local and regional governments to see how it is done everywhere. I know that we have lots in UN, but UN content of reports, etc., is not always accessible. Sorry to say this to the normal people on this earth. So sometimes it's just necessary to exchange experience. And I think more and more, not only on the plastic topic, but especially on this topic as we are discussing, that the central government has a responsibility to explain also and to compare for the local governments on its territory, within its frontiers, also how it is done elsewhere. And this doesn't necessarily cost money. Okay, it can cost a little bit of money to organize, explanation and training, but this can bring a lot of added value as it will be established an involvement and a dialogue from central to local level. So Diana, turning to you more or less for concluding this debate, but also replying to the questions which were at the beginning: voluntary measures, dialogue, central, regional, local government.
I think there's also something important to highlight. One of the points that were mentioned by Bernardo, because he mentioned, he gave a larger explanation here. It's the issue of standards and of metrics, because if we want to work all together, we need to speak the same language.
Absolutely.
And we need to have common ways of measuring things. And this we have been, one of the points that has come out in many of the things we have organized on this discussion on plastic, not only on plastics, also on other topics, including on biodiversity, for example. Is that this is really an important point, and there is, we are here in Geneva, and we, the Geneva Climate Network, mobilized on environmental negotiations at the global level, and with actors who work on these issues. We have a lot of standardization organizations here, and this is also something that that needs some more work, and even though there has already been some work, but it needs to be expanded a little bit more, so that we are able to speak the same language, to compare what we do, and to measure how we are advancing to beat plastic pollution.
And we will do this in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, there's work ongoing. I'm thinking about our friends from TESS and others. There's work ongoing, and yeah, there is mobilization. And also within the United Nations in our program, other standardization organizations, being it ISO, ECOS, and many others. There is work ongoing on these 3 minutes, one of the important elements.
Thank you very much, and really concluding this, I hope, interesting and for everyone and informative discussion. To tell you that yes, we spoke about submissions. Again, thank you picking up your last point. Insisting on speaking the same language, and really reiterating what I said also, and what was said here is that as the local governments and regional governments are very much on concrete measures, we need to find a way which reconciles the negotiation and the language of the treaty with this requirement of concrete measures, probably again through platforms of exchange of practices, inclusion on voluntary commitments, which can be also published somewhere on the website of the Secretariat from concrete cities, and other such practices, and to ask member states to have attentive ear and eye on the local and regional governments, because this treaty, whichever the content is, it will very much depend of the commitment and involvement of local governments in all the countries, developing, developed. We know that in this area, local and regional governments have a strong role to play. Same claim to the NGOs, the civil society, the coalitions. It's not a criticism, but I am quite surprised and not pleasantly surprised by the fact that none of them, no EUCN, no WWF, these big coalitions, absolutely nobody is mentioning the local and regional governments. I did a research. I found this is, yeah, it's kind of a little bit probably unrealistic, but this is my opinion. So not criticizing, because as we are early days, but also making a plea to the very active and very knowledgeable civil and academia society in this topic. Don't forget who will be in charge at the end of the day of implementation of this treaty. And unfortunately, don't forget that out in the space we have very beautiful international treaties which are well written and duly ratified and not implemented or very partially implemented because not everything is in the state of national governments, not in the civil society. And so we need this main actor here, which are the local and regional governments. With this, we'll try to continue to work and to implement this commitment. Probably last word just to say what you think about all this and to thank all the participants who stayed with us. Yes, please.
Well, thank you, Camilla, and for organizing again this important meeting. And I think it's very important that to promote this kind of events in order to raise awareness of the process. We are very likely negotiating the most important environmental treaty in many years. And this is very important to have in mind, because we want to tackle one of the main three planetary crises, which is pollution, along with climate change and loss of biodiversity. So it's very important that all stakeholders can be engaged in this very important process in order to have a meaningful impact for future generations. So we have to keep in mind this, that we are all working in order to have an ambitious treaty, in order to have concrete and effective measures to end plastic pollution. So again, I call to all actors from local governments, regional and government and central actors, academia, public sectors, everybody to be engaged in this important process, because this is the only way that we can have a real meaningful impact for the future. Thank you very much again for organizing this meeting. And
thank you for being so comprehensive, informative, and involved in this. Very appreciated.
Thank you also for inviting the Geneva Environment Network. The last briefing we organized through our Geneva Plastic Pollution Dialogue in the run-up to the last INC, we had you on the table, and so we will continue to give you the floor. We want to engage you more, not only on this plastic issue, but as Bernardo just remember, we are facing a tripartite crisis. We have various topics we are addressing, and we hope to have you also on board on all the discussions we are having in preparation of the various negotiations related to the environment.
Are you hiring me online here in front of 100 and something people? Thank you so much for this. So thank you very much for this debate, and we will continue the engagement. We will continue before, after the different things as they go to inform our constituency and networks. Thank you for the participation, and have a nice day, afternoon or evening to all of you.